Women sought milk baths to preserve their beauty, but this woman bathed in blood in the embrace of darkness. Every era gives birth to its own terrifying legend. The goddess of fear in this age was Elizabeth Bathory, the architect of a nightmare written in blood. If you're ready, let's begin. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Elizabeth Bathory was born into the powerful and eccentric Bathory family, who played a prominent role in late medieval and early modern Hungary. In 1571, at the age of 16, she became engaged to Count Ferenc Nadasdy and moved into her family's castle in Sarvar. During this time, under the influence of her sadistic aunt Carla Bathory, she began torturing servant girls. Hungary was torn by religious conflicts, and in places where spiritual division and heresy were widespread, witchcraft and pre-Christian cults thrived. Elizabeth seemed obsessed with dark magic and surrounded herself with witches who assisted her in sadistic sexual rituals. Elizabeth Bathory and Ferenc Nadasdy married in May 1575. The Hungarian ruler of the time was King Rudolf II, an eccentric recluse obsessed with alchemy and magic. Rudolf settled in Prague and left his brother, Archduke Matthias, in Vienna to manage Hungary's affairs. The Ottoman threat beyond the border remained very real, eventually erupting into the 15 Years' War, 1591 to 1606. Nadasdy, a born warrior with an insatiable thirst for glory, was almost constantly away on campaign. Meanwhile, Elizabeth stayed behind in Sarvar, torturing her female servants. For a decade, Bathory and Nadasdy had no children, but around 1585 they had a daughter named Anna, followed by Ursula and Katharina, and in 1598 a son named Paul. Elizabeth told her husband that all births were achieved through witchcraft. During these years, the 15 Years' War raged on, but exhaustion and devastated countryside eventually forced both sides to seek peace. Nadasdy, however, never lived to see it. He died in Sarvar on January 4, 1604. With her husband's death, Bathory grew even more reckless. According to Nadasdy's will, the estates of Sarvar and others, along with the education of their son, perhaps an illegitimate child or a close relative, were entrusted to a mysterious figure named Imre Magyari. Bathory's hatred and fear of Magyari were well-founded. Bathory first moved to the Nadasdy Palace in Vienna. The monks of a nearby monastery complained of inhuman screams coming from the opposite building at night, and of blood flowing into the streets through the sewers. The head monk was told that the Countess required fresh flesh for her health. Bathory spent much of her time between various castles, one in western Hungary and another in western Slovakia. Surrounded by trusted female confidants, Bathory formed a particularly close relationship with a witch from Sarvar named Anna Darvulia, who was likely her lover. Anna may have been the one to initiate the horrific practice that later earned the Countess her notorious reputation. One day, while one of the Countess's maids was brushing Anna's hair, Bathory struck her so hard, out of clumsiness, that some of the girl's blood stained her arm. When another maid rushed to wipe it away, her skin appeared whiter than before. Anna then assured Bathory that bathing in the blood of young virgins would preserve her extraordinary beauty. Peasant girls were systematically gathered, tortured, and then killed through bloodletting so that Bathory could bathe in their blood. Her castles contained iron cages. A girl placed inside would be sliced into strips by moving steel blades, while the Countess bathed beneath in warm blood. Like many psychopaths, Bathory sought ever more extreme forms of stimulation, and as her tortures grew more horrific and the number of victims increased, rumors began to spread. At an unknown date, Anna Darvulia died, and Bathory found a new confidant in Erzhi Mazharova, the widow of a local farmer from nearby Čachtice. Bathory began to doubt the effectiveness of her bloodbaths. As age advanced, Mazharova suggested replacing peasant girls with virgins from higher social classes. and Bathory recklessly embraced this idea. Few questions were asked about the disappearance of peasant girls, but missing upper-class victims triggered an investigation. A Lutheran priest in Čachtice confronted the Countess over the burial of so many young girls and left a report outlining his suspicions to his successor. The next priest also questioned the number of burials and discovered decaying corpses of young girls in a crypt beneath his church. Fearing the priest's suspicions, the outwardly devout Bathory stopped granting Christian funerals to her victims. Disposal of the bodies became a serious problem, and her servants grew careless. On one occasion, while her eldest daughter Anna's husband visited Čachtice, his hounds discovered human remains in the garden. But the times were changing. Archduke Matthias was eager to ascend the throne. In January 1608, the Hungarian Diet, led by prominent Protestant nobles such as Bathory's relative György Thurzo, elected Matthias as King of Hungary in exchange for a promise of religious tolerance. On January 25, 1608, Rudolf abdicated the Hungarian throne in favor of his younger brother, and on November 16, 1608, Matthias was crowned at St. Martin's Cathedral in Poznan, Bratislava. Bathory likely attended the ceremony, after which Thurzo was appointed Palatine, royal representative of Hungary. Matthias now had his sights set on Bohemia and the imperial crown. Although a Catholic, he had shown great loyalty to his Protestant subjects at the recent coronation. Elizabeth Bathory's actions now presented a dilemma. She was both a Protestant and a Bathory, and her relative Gábor Bathory was the Prince of Transylvania, yet Matthias wanted a public investigation. Thurzo was more cautious than the king. He did not doubt the accusations, the evidence was overwhelming, but a Bathory was still a Bathory, and the family had served the state faithfully for generations. His solution was to forcibly remove Elizabeth Bathory from Čachtice and confine her to a convent, allowing her estates to pass to the rightful heirs. Before this plan could be carried out, however, Bathory's enemy, Imre Magyari, testified against her before the Hungarian Diet in late 1610. Events began to move quickly, and Thurzo was forced to act. On December 29, 1610, accompanied by Bathory's sons-in-law Miklos Zrínyi, György Drugeth, and Imre Magyari, Thurzo arrived in Čachtice with an armed escort. The horrific discoveries that followed confirmed the grim rumors and proved them true. Enraged, Bathory defended her innocence but was placed under house arrest in the castle. Her servants were taken to Thurzo's residence in Bitsa for questioning. Two further hearings were held, one on January 2, 1611, and another on January 7, 1611. At the first hearing, 13 witnesses gave testimony. In addition, 4 of Bathory's maids provided striking details of how the Countess had carried out her tortures. At the second hearing, conducted in secret at Thurzo's insistence, a maid presented a list, written in the Countess's own handwriting, containing the names of 650 victims. 2 female servants were sentenced by the executioner to have their fingers broken before being burned alive. A male servant was beheaded and his body burned. A 4th servant was spared execution. A few days later, the witch Erzhi Majorova was captured, tried, and burned at the stake. Elizabeth Bathory was never formally tried for her crimes. Instead, she was sentenced to life imprisonment in a sealed room with her doors and windows barred, leaving only a small opening for food. She remained imprisoned until her death on August 21, 1614, after which her body was taken to Eched for burial. Her vast estate was divided among her son and sons-in-law. Matthias was not satisfied with this secret trial. He would have preferred a public trial with the confiscation of the Countess's property. However, Thurzo, along with Palnadajdi and Miklos Zrínyi, refused to grant this, supported by petitions to avoid further scandal. Matthias respected their wishes. He had other priorities. On May 23, 1611, the Bohemian Diet elected him King of Bohemia. In December 1611, the 55-year-old ruler married his 26-year-old cousin. Finally, on June 13, 1612, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. the horrors of Čachtice could be forgotten. In the early Renaissance of Central Europe, belief in witchcraft and the occult was widespread. The crimes committed by Elizabeth Bathory reflect sadistic mutilations, serial murders, and even alleged cannibalism, acts that would make headlines in the 21st century, as well as crimes rooted in a distant past. What made Bathory unique was not only the reported number of her victims, but also the length of her horrific career, tolerated within the unjust social order of what is now modern Hungary. Certainly, there were psychopathic criminals in Jacobite England, but the social system there would have made it nearly impossible for a serial killer to murder more than 600 people. Write your favorite moment in the comments, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Next week, we'll meet again in the darkness with another cursed nightmare.